Dark clouds loomed over the exquisite Beaumont estate, their rumble shaking the towering columns and perfectly manicured hedges. A silent figure stood near a marble balcony, eyes fixed on the looming storm, her posture poised, yet heartbreak etched into her face. Eleanor Beaumont, once a devoted wife hidden beneath her billionaire husband's glittering success, was about to reveal her own quiet power. Julian Beaumont, the handsome, swaggering mogul, thought he owned the world. But little did he know, his silent wife had an ace up her sleeve. Tonight the world would learn how a betrayed spouse could strip a billionaire of everything he cherished. Eleanor Rafferty was born in a small, cozy town near the coast of Massachusetts. Her parents, Richard and Marie Rafferty, were librarians with a deep appreciation for literature, quiet routines, and moral integrity. Eleanor, their only child, possessed a gentle spirit, immersed in novels and the soft music of the classical radio station that always played in her home. She grew up believing in the quiet power of honesty, loyalty, and kindness. She was 22 when she first met Julian Beaumont, a charming entrepreneur whose tech startup had begun making headlines on business blogs. Julian was hosting a charity fundraiser for a children's hospital in Boston, and Eleanor had volunteered, serving champagne to the philanthropic elite. Standing a head taller than most, with striking green eyes, Julian commanded the room. He noticed Eleanor's calm grace amid the clamor, and intrigued by her gentle smile, he struck up a conversation. By the end of the evening, he invited her to dinner at an upscale bistro, something so far removed from her everyday life that it felt surreal. To Eleanor's surprise, she discovered that Julian could be disarmingly humble despite his wealth. He spoke with passion about bridging technology gaps in underprivileged communities. His ambition was electric, inspiring her in a way no one else had before. Within weeks, they were inseparable. Despite the stark contrast between Eleanor's quiet world and Julian's high-stakes entrepreneurial realm, they found a balance, or so she thought. The wedding took place a year later in a grand cathedral in downtown Boston, officiated by Father Maxwell, a longtime family friend. Billionaire investors and philanthropic icons like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett sent their best wishes, while local residents who knew Eleanor's parents as humble librarians also arrived with heartfelt gifts. The press buzzed about the modern fairy tale of a small-town librarian's daughter marrying a rising tech mogul. Soon, the newlyweds moved to a penthouse in Manhattan's Upper East Side. Julian's tech startup, Ellis, exploded in valuation as it went public. Eleanor, overwhelmed by the sudden swirl of media attention and extravagant parties, tried to anchor her life in philanthropic endeavors. She began supporting literacy campaigns across the country, hoping to remain true to her roots. For a while, it worked. As Ellis soared to multi-billion-dollar status, Julian showered Eleanor with tokens of devotion, diamond necklaces, exotic vacations, a stable of pricey cars. In the tabloids, they became the ideal power couple. But behind the scenes, cracks began to form. Julian's relentless drive for expansion turned him into a workaholic. He surrounded himself with an army of legal teams, financial advisors, and board members who reinforced his image as a visionary. While Eleanor admired his ambition, she grew uneasy at the darkness creeping into his eyes, a need for endless admiration, the craving for more deals, more acquisitions, more fame. She tried voicing her concerns. "Don't lose sight of what you stand for, Julian," she'd say gently, usually after a day when he'd barely come home before midnight. He'd wave it off, hugging her absent-mindedly, promising that once Tech Ellis's latest round of funding closed, things would calm down. But one funding round led to another. When Tech Ellis acquired a major competitor, Julian's fortunes skyrocketed. Everything turned into headlines. Beaumont's tech empire soars. Beaumont named the next Steve Jobs. Investors rally behind new tech titan. In these articles, Eleanor was a footnote, overshadowed by her husband's unstoppable rise. Little did Julian know he was steadily pushing away the one person who had truly believed in him from the start. And little did Eleanor realize her silent resilience, a trait she'd carried from her simple upbringing, would soon become her greatest weapon. Because behind the scenes, whispers about Julian's extracurricular activities and questionable alliances were growing louder. The perfect illusion of their marriage was about to crack, and with it would come a shock that would leave him reeling. Amid swirling rumors of expansions into Asia and Europe, Julian began traveling frequently. Eleanor understood the nature of his business demanded global presence. Meetings in Hong Kong, conferences in Berlin, investor gatherings in Dubai. At first, she trusted he was too focused on Tech Ellis to indulge in personal temptations. But subtle changes gave her pause. He stopped calling her from trips, a habit he'd maintained faithfully during their first years of marriage. When she texted him, responses came hours, sometimes days, later, often laced with vague excuses. Got tied up in a meeting. Sorry, time difference, or battery died. Meanwhile, social media posts revealed him at lavish after-parties, raising champagne flutes alongside glamorous individuals, many of them women whose names Eleanor had never heard. At first, she tried to brush it off. She was not the jealous type, nor did she have the desire to police her husband's every move. But her intuition told her something had shifted. Even their closest friend, Michelle Donovan, who had known Julian since college, hinted at uncomfortable sightings. She'd casually mention, "I saw Julian at that new rooftop lounge, but he didn't notice me. He was with a crowd." The unspoken concern in Michelle's eyes unsettled Eleanor. Eleanor confronted Julian about his distance, but he dismissed her concerns with vague promises. A lingering, unfamiliar perfume on his suit confirmed her fears. She felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach, but said nothing. Confrontation might only push him away, she reasoned. Instead, she started paying closer attention to the business details. She inquired more about Tech Ellis's corporate structure, the major shareholders, the board's involvement. If Julian had found time to stray emotionally or physically, Eleanor resolved not to be blindsided. Eleanor discovered that Julian's romantic gesture of granting her Tech Ellis shares had given her quiet but significant power over the company. Eleanor's heart pounded. She imagined a scenario where Julian might attempt to cut her out if things turned sour. But it seemed that his early romantic gesture, combined with certain legal frameworks, secured her position. Why didn't he mention this? Perhaps he assumed she would never use that power, or perhaps he had simply forgotten. Either way, an unsettling possibility sparked in her mind. If her worst suspicions came true, she was not as powerless as she once believed. Meanwhile, the rumors about Julian's cheating grew persistent. Whispers of a woman named Ava LeBlanc, a stunning French consultant with her own thriving investment firm, began surfacing among high society circles. People spoke of them dining at an exclusive restaurant in Paris after a business conference, glimpses of them dancing closely at a yacht party in Monaco. Each rumor chipped away at Eleanor's trust, leaving her uncertain whether to gather proof or preserve her sanity by looking away. Yet her inherent nature wasn't to lash out or cause public scenes. She wanted truth, not drama. So she waited silently, her gaze more keenly focused on the changes in her husband's behavior. If Julian was indeed stepping out on her, she would handle it with the grace her parents taught her, but also with the cunning that life in a billionaire's world had forced her to learn. The final confirmation of Julian's affair arrived in the most unexpected way. Michelle Donovan, worried about Eleanor, took it upon herself to dig deeper. She was no private investigator, but as a longtime journalist for a business magazine, she had the resources and contacts to figure things out. One morning, Michelle showed up at Eleanor's penthouse unannounced, carrying a large folder and wearing a grim expression. Over chamomile tea in the sunlit living room, Michelle laid out the evidence. Grainy photos from a paparazzo who specialized in trailing high-profile CEOs, credit card receipts from a hotel in Santorini, suspicious expense reports from Techelis that covered lavish dinners under marketing expenditures. The photos told the truth that rumors only hinted at: Julian and Ava LeBlanc, entangled in each other's arms, whispering under candlelit settings, gazing into each other's eyes on a Mediterranean beach. Eleanor stared at the images, her face impassive. 1,000 emotions whirled inside: betrayal, anger, heartbreak, humiliation. But her upbringing had taught her to meet crises with quiet strength. She inhaled deeply and said, "Thank you, Michelle. This must have been hard for you." Her friend frowned. "I hated doing it, but you deserve the truth. What are you going to do?" Eleanor paused, carefully placing the photos back into the folder. "I'm not sure yet, but I know I can't ignore it." No tears came, even after Michelle left. Instead, Eleanor took a long walk through Central Park, the crisp air biting her cheeks, the city's noise seeming oddly distant. She recalled her mother's gentle guidance about loyalty. If someone betrays you, dignity is your best shield. Dignity. That word echoed in her mind as she returned home. She decided on a plan. First, she would speak to her father, who, though no corporate expert, was a man of unshakable moral clarity. Then she would consult an attorney, quietly. She also wanted to see the corporate documents again, to confirm her position. The last step would be confronting Julian in a controlled environment, not in anger, but with strategic composure. Richard Rafferty listened to his daughter's calm explanation of the affair and nodded sadly. "I'm sorry, Eleanor. This is not what you signed up for, but you're strong. Follow your conscience. If you need to walk away, then do so. If you want to fight for your marriage, that's also your choice, but never sacrifice your self-respect." Eleanor engaged Gerald Hammond, a high-powered attorney known for his discretion. He reviewed the Techelis stock ownership and pre-nuptial documents, eyebrows shooting up in surprise. "This is highly unusual," he remarked. "You effectively hold controlling interest in Techelis if you combine your shares with certain clauses about marital property. Julian must have been extremely in love at the start." He gave her a cautious look. "You could, in theory, oust him if you wanted, or at least leverage a massive settlement in a divorce. Are you sure about your next steps?" A wave of sadness washed over Eleanor. She wasn't driven by greed, and she remembered the good times they'd shared. She only wanted to be loved honestly. Yet Julian's betrayal had forced her hand. "I'll confront him," she said softly, "and then I'll decide." Within days, an opportunity arose. Julian was returning from another business trip in Dubai, rumored to be with Ava. Eleanor prepared the penthouse, sending their staff away for the evening, wanting complete privacy. She waited in the living room, the folder of incriminating evidence on the coffee table. When Julian returned home, Eleanor confronted him with the evidence. He stammered excuses, but her calm declaration, "I know everything," left him speechless. His eyes darted, guilt morphing into a desperate attempt at defense. He stammered through half-baked excuses about stress, business relationships, and meaningless flings. Eleanor listened silently, her gaze never leaving his face. When he finally ran out of words, she said, "You betrayed me, and you betrayed the man I thought you were." He reached for her hand, but she stepped away. "Don't," she whispered. Then, lifting her chin, she delivered a statement that made him blanch. "I also know that I have controlling shares in Techelis. Effective immediately, I'm taking steps to protect myself and what we built together." Julian's mouth hung open, color draining from his cheeks. He tried to form words, but only a strangled sound emerged. For the first time, he grasped that Eleanor was not the helpless, docile partner he had taken her for, and she had the power to upend everything. She didn't scream, she didn't throw objects, she didn't crumble. Instead, she gave him a final, solemn look. "Gerald Hammond will be in touch about the specifics," she said quietly. "I suggest you cooperate. Good night, Julian." With that, she walked out, leaving him alone in the lavish penthouse that suddenly felt cold and empty. Outside, the city glittered, but inside Julian, a sense of dread began to grow, overshadowing the pride he once wore like a crown. Eleanor's composure, after confronting Julian, left him reeling. In the days that followed, her silence spoke volumes. She moved out of the penthouse, checking into a luxury hotel near Central Park, under her name and with her own finances. Julian discovered that the staff refused to divulge any details of her whereabouts. She had instructed them to remain loyal to her or risk termination. Even in the daily routines, she retained power he never imagined she possessed. Back at Techelis, rumors swirled among upper management that something was off. Julian became uncharacteristically erratic, snapping at employees, missing key meetings, and cloistering himself in his office. The board noticed. Whispers about his personal life, overshadowing his leadership, began to surface. Meanwhile, Ava LeBlanc's presence grew more blatant. She attended strategy sessions as a consultant and frequently lingered in Julian's corridor. Some employees gossiped that she was pulling strings behind the scenes, pressuring Julian to grant her bigger roles. Little did Julian realize that Eleanor, through her attorney, Gerald Hammond, was quietly rearranging the corporate chessboard. Ever since their marriage, she had possessed roughly 31% of Techelis's outstanding shares, an enormous chunk. Julian, ironically, held around 29% due to various equity trades and expansions. The rest belonged to other shareholders. Because of the couple's prenuptial and certain legal structures, if Julian's personal misconduct was proven, the prenuptial allowed Eleanor even greater leverage over the shares. Working with Gerald, Eleanor set up a shell entity, Rafferty Legacy Holdings, to which she transferred her Techelis shares. On paper, this meant the controlling interest no longer bore her name directly, adding a layer of anonymity. She also engaged with a small group of longtime investors who respected her philanthropic endeavors and moral stance. They quietly pledged their proxies to her in upcoming board decisions. On top of that, Michelle Donovan, using her media connections, subtly floated rumors of questionable financial dealings at Techelis. This was a strategic strike at Julian's credibility. Meanwhile, Julian tried desperately to reach Eleanor. Late-night voicemails apologized profusely, threatened legal battles, or pleaded for another chance. He left tearful messages that toggled between regret and anger. "Please come back, we can fix this," Or, "You can't just walk away with everything we built." She never replied. For every frantic call from him, she took 2 measured steps forward in her plan. She even met with Ava LeBlanc discreetly, an encounter orchestrated by Gerald. The meeting took place at a neutral location, a high-rise law office with tinted windows overlooking the city. As soon as Eleanor entered the conference room, Ava's eyes flickered with contempt and, perhaps, a hint of jealousy. The French consultant carried herself with the confidence of someone used to winning. She offered a thin, polite smile. "You wanted to see me, Mrs. Beaumont," Ava said, voice silky. Eleanor settled into a chair, folding her hands on the table. "I asked for this meeting to clarify the situation," she replied, her tone calm. "I'm aware of your relationship with my husband. I also understand you've been influencing Tekelis decisions in a questionable manner." Ava's brows arched, playing innocence. "Julian and I are just colleagues, exploring expansion opportunities. If you're here to accuse me—" "No accusations, only facts," Eleanor interjected, sliding a document across the table. It detailed Tekelis's shareholders and the new entity, Rafferty Legacy Holdings, that effectively held controlling interest. "You're free to continue your liaison with Julian if you wish, but under no circumstances will you meddle in Tekelis affairs to undermine my position. If you do, I can initiate legal proceedings for breach of fiduciary duty and corporate sabotage. I also have enough evidence of your personal relationship with him, financed at times by Tekelis funds, which constitutes misappropriation. The choice is yours. Stay away from corporate decisions or face legal consequences." Ava's facade cracked briefly. She realized she was dealing not with a timid wife, but a formidable negotiator. Pursing her lips, she forced a casual shrug. "I'm sure we can all coexist without conflict." Eleanor stood, smoothing her skirt. "I appreciate your willingness to cooperate. Enjoy your day, Ms. LeBlanc." Then she walked out, leaving Ava fuming. In that moment, Eleanor felt a surge of empowerment. She had no desire to stoop to Ava's manipulative level. Instead, she leveraged her quiet knowledge, her rightful shares, and the moral high ground. For years, she had been the supportive partner in Julian's shadow. Now, she was emerging as the central figure, and she wasn't finished yet. Tekelis's monthly board meeting arrived on a dreary Monday, the sky thick with rain clouds mirroring the tension inside. It was the first board gathering since the rumors about Julian's personal life began swirling. He walked into the top-floor conference room wearing a confident mask, though his gut churned with anxiety. Ava LeBlanc followed at a distance, eyes scanning the room for familiar faces. She half expected a triumphant entry, given that she and Julian had been lobbying certain board members for new expansion projects. The table was impressive. Polished mahogany, with seats for the board's dozen members plus Julian, the CEO. At the head, an empty chair signaled the seat reserved for the controlling shareholder or representative. Historically, that was always a formality because Julian was assumed to hold the largest stake. But times had changed. Whispers rippled through the room as Eleanor, flanked by Gerald Hammond, entered. She carried herself with quiet poise, wearing a tailored black suit that accentuated her graceful figure. Julian, seated at the far end, froze. He had half expected her to show up, but seeing her stride in with authority still took him by surprise. Board members exchanged glances. Some rose to greet her, others looked anxious. This was a new dynamic. Typically, they only saw Eleanor at charity galas or Tekelis anniversary celebrations. Her presence here, in a board meeting, was unprecedented. Eleanor took the seat at the head of the table. She placed a neat folder in front of her, folded her hands on top, and offered a polite nod. "Good morning," she said, voice steady. The board's chairperson, Arthur Millstone, cleared his throat. "Mrs. Beaumont, we were not aware you'd be attending in an official capacity." "With due respect, Mr. Millstone," Gerald Hammond interjected, "my client, Mrs. Eleanor Beaumont, is here to represent Rafferty Legacy Holdings, the entity that now effectively holds the controlling block of Tech Ellis shares." Murmurs rose. Julian stiffened, jaw clenched. He glanced at Ava, who looked away, feigning interest in her phone. The tension was palpable. Eleanor addressed the board directly. "For years, I trusted my husband to manage Tech Ellis's affairs. However, recent events, both personal and financial, necessitate that I exercise my rights as controlling shareholder." Julian spoke up, forcing a smirk. "I'm still CEO, Eleanor. You can't just waltz in here and take over." Arthur Millstone raised a hand to calm them. "Please, let's maintain decorum. Mrs. Beaumont, how do you wish to proceed?" Eleanor took a measured breath, her voice unwavering. "First, I'd like a comprehensive audit of Tech Ellis's finances for the past 2 years, especially in areas labeled miscellaneous corporate expenses. Second, I propose suspending any new expansions or mergers until the audit is complete. Third, we open the floor to discuss the leadership structure going forward." Julian's face reddened. "This is madness. You can't suspend expansions. We have deals in the pipeline." "Deals that haven't been approved by the full board," Eleanor countered softly. She looked at the members. "I'm not here to harm Tech Ellis. I'm here to protect it from unethical decisions. If the expansions are legitimate, they will stand upon scrutiny. If not, they will be halted. As for leadership, I believe the board must review Julian's role given the controversies swirling around his personal finances and potential misuse of corporate resources." A hush settled. Board member Patricia Reynolds, who had previously admired Julian's vision, spoke gently. "Mr. Beaumont, we can't ignore these concerns. Shareholders are spooked. Investors are calling. We need a show of stability and integrity. An audit might be necessary." Julian's hands curled into fists under the table. He scanned the room, searching for support, but saw only apprehension or resignation on the faces that once applauded his every move. Then he turned to Eleanor, anger and betrayal darkening his eyes. "You'd destroy me like this?" Her gaze held a quiet sorrow. "You destroyed what we had the moment you prioritized your ego and your affair over our marriage. I'm merely ensuring Tech Ellis isn't dragged down by personal indiscretions." Gerald Hammond glanced at Julian. "We welcome your cooperation, Mr. Beaumont. It would demonstrate good faith to the board and shareholders." Julian glowered, but he realized he was cornered. A meltdown here would only confirm everyone's worst fears. Forcing a tight smile, he muttered, "Fine. We'll do the audit." He glared at the board members, "But know that I have no intention of stepping down." Eleanor simply nodded. "We'll see what the audit reveals." With that, the board meeting moved forward, though the atmosphere remained charged with tension. The powerful CEO who once strode into these meetings as a visionary now found himself at the mercy of his betrayed wife's newfound authority. Outside, rain battered the glass windows, as if the heavens themselves lamented the fracturing of an empire that once seemed invincible. The decision to audit Tech Ellis unleashed a whirlwind of activity. Arthur Millstone appointed an independent accounting firm, Jacoby & Price, to pore over the company's ledgers. They arrived in droves, well-dressed financial experts armed with laptops and endless spreadsheets. The firm interviewed employees, demanded access to private files, and flagged any suspicious spending. Emails referencing special dinners and private jets soon surfaced, painting a picture of reckless expenditures with little oversight. Meanwhile, Julian's focus collapsed under the weight of scrutiny. He found himself bombarded with pointed questions from Jacoby and Price auditors. Why had tens of thousands of dollars been funneled into overseas accounts labeled consulting fees? Why were there repeated charges for five-star resorts that never aligned with official business travel? In each case, he struggled to explain. The board looked on with concern, their confidence in their charismatic CEO eroding by the day. Ava LeBlanc fared no better. Once she realized the audit was serious, she tried to distance herself, claiming she was merely an external consultant. But her name appeared too frequently in Tekelis's expense reports, linking her to questionable transactions. She locked herself in conference rooms, calling in favors, trying to hush rumors. Some board members suggested she should resign. Her pride wouldn't allow that, but she felt the chill of disapproval in every corridor. Eleanor, on the other hand, remained a calm presence. She didn't gloat or parade her authority. She simply attended each board meeting, listened attentively to updates from Jacoby and Price, and asked thoughtful questions. If the auditors needed more time or resources, she approved them without hesitation. Her aim was clear: restore Tekelis's integrity. On a personal level, every new revelation of Julian's misuse of funds, often to impress Ava or to throw lavish private parties, pierced her heart, but she kept her composure. She was determined to see this through to the end. One afternoon, she received a call from Michelle Donovan, who had been quietly gathering intel as well. "You won't believe what's making the rounds," Michelle said, her voice urgent. "Some tabloids got wind of the internal audit. They're publishing exposés on Tekelis's shady dealings. Julian's affair with Ava is about to go mainstream news." Eleanor sighed, her voice tinged with weariness. "I expected as much. Let the truth come out. If the public needs to see what's behind the curtain, so be it. Tekelis will either survive or it won't, but I refuse to let lies continue." That night, headlines blazed across social media and financial news networks. Tekelis under audit, allegations of fraud and extravagant spending. CEO Julian Beaumont linked to scandalous affair. Company shares plummet on investor fears. Tekelis stock took a nosedive, losing hundreds of millions in market capitalization overnight. Julian, holed up in his private suite, watched the meltdown on multiple TV screens, while Ava tried to console him with empty words. Every ring of his phone could be an investor pulling out, a journalist demanding comment, or his lawyers warning him that he faced possible legal action. Fury coiled in his chest. He slammed a glass onto a marble counter, shattering it. "She's destroying everything," he seethed, referencing Eleanor. "I have to stop this." Ava flinched at his outburst, fear flickering in her eyes. Maybe we should issue a public statement, deny everything, place blame on the board, or claim the audit is routine." Julian raked a hand through his hair, exhaling shakily. "Number, they have real evidence. Denial won't work. I need to talk to Eleanor." He sounded more desperate than determined. The next morning, Julian tried to call Eleanor, only to be rerouted to Gerald Hammond's office. He was told any communication regarding Tekelis or personal matters must go through legal channels. Frustration mounted. In a last-ditch move, he marched down to the building where the board convened and cornered Eleanor in the hallway. Wearing a simple, elegant dress and carrying a stack of files, she looked at him with detached calm. He half expected her to lash out, but she simply raised an eyebrow. "Is there something you need?" His voice quavered. "We need to talk about the damage you're causing. Our stock is in free fall. The board is losing faith." She regarded him with quiet intensity. "I'm not the one who ran off with a mistress and charged it all to Tech Ellis. This is the consequence of your actions, Julian." The sincerity in her tone stung. He tried a different approach, softening his gaze, letting a tremor slip into his voice. "What about us, Eleanor? Isn't there any chance to salvage our marriage?" She hesitated, a flash of pain crossing her face. Then her expression hardened. "Any chance we had, you threw away. I'm done living in illusions. From here on out, we finalize the corporate situation, and if needed, we settle our marriage in court." His shoulders sagged. He realized that the woman he once believed so gentle and malleable was now unwavering in her resolve. She would see this through, no matter how it ended. The reality struck him like a blow. In betraying Eleanor, he might have lost everything: his marriage, his reputation, and perhaps even the empire he built. As the audit progressed, Tech Ellis's finances revealed a Pandora's box of mismanagement, particularly around Julian's unauthorized spending. Luxury villas, private jets booked for corporate trips that suspiciously coincided with holiday seasons, and inflated consultancy payments made to shell companies linked to Ava LeBlanc. The board reviewed Jacoby and Price's preliminary findings with grim faces, aware that investors would demand accountability. Eleanor's stance remained firm, though it cost her emotionally. Each line item flagged as entertainment or personal dining from Tech Ellis funds was a fresh sting of betrayal. She had never been fixated on wealth, only on building a life with someone she loved. But now, that wealth was the battleground upon which her marriage crumbled. She often retreated to her hotel suite at night, staring out the window at the glittering city, remembering the simpler times with Julian, when they cooked spaghetti together in their small Boston apartment, or strolled hand in hand through Fenway Park. Those memories felt like they belonged to strangers. Meanwhile, tabloids ran wild with the story. Paparazzi camped outside Tech Ellis headquarters. Business channels dissected the corporate drama, with talking heads debating whether Julian would be forced to resign. Some even speculated that Eleanor Beaumont, a name once unknown to mainstream media, had orchestrated a revenge takeover. The irony wasn't lost on her. She never wanted a spectacle, only justice and truth. Social media was equally aflame. Hashtags like #Tech Ellis scandal trended, while countless memes joked about infidelity leading to bankrupting stupidity. Many netizens surprisingly rallied behind Eleanor, praising her calm approach in exposing corporate misdeeds. She read some supportive messages, finding a small measure of comfort in them. In a crucial development, Arthur Millstone convened an emergency board session to discuss a leadership shakeup. Jacoby and Price's preliminary report suggested that continuing with Julian as CEO would risk further devaluation of Tech Ellis. Investors were restless, with some selling off shares in a panic. The board wanted to nip the crisis in the bud, and Julian's misjudgments had left them little choice. Julian arrived at the meeting, tight-lipped, escorted by two attorneys who looked equally grim. Eleanor sat at the head of the table again, Gerald by her side. She braced herself for what would undoubtedly be a pivotal moment. Arthur stood, clearing his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have all seen the draft audit. Tech Ellis's brand is tarnished. The board is considering new leadership." He hesitated, then read from a resolution drafted by the company's legal counsel. A vote of no confidence in Julian Beaumont as CEO, leading to an interim appointment while the audit concludes. Tension crackled in the air. Julian clenched his jaw, looking around the table at faces that once idolized him. Memories of triumphant board meetings, when Tekelis soared in stock value, clashed with this humiliating reality. He shot a glare at Eleanor, who held his gaze steadily. Arthur continued, "Before we proceed with the vote, Mr. Beaumont, you have the right to speak." Julian rose, suit jacket taut across his shoulders. He forced a measured calm into his voice. "Yes, I made mistakes. I let my personal life interfere with company funds, but I'm still the founder, the visionary. Removing me will destabilize Tekelis further. Let me correct my errors. Let me guide us back to profitability." Silence followed. Then Patricia Reynolds, who had once been Julian's staunch supporter, spoke in a resigned tone. "Julian, you lost our trust. We need stability now, not apologies. I'm sorry, but I have to vote in favor of new leadership." One by one, the board members cast their votes. Most cited the need to protect the company's image, to reassure investors, and to hold the CEO accountable for any wrongdoing. Julian watched in horror as each eye to remove him hammered another nail into his coffin. When it reached Eleanor's turn, she spoke softly. "I vote in favor of the resolution." Julian closed his eyes. The final tally was near unanimous. Julian Beaumont was effectively stripped of his position as CEO, pending further investigation and the completion of the audit. An interim CEO, a senior board member known for crisis management, would step in. As the resolution passed, the room's atmosphere was heavy. Julian, pride wounded, stormed out without a word. Ava LeBlanc, who had attended the meeting in the back row, followed him, her expression a mix of shock and anger. The empire he built, the power he flaunted, now hung in the balance. Eleanor stayed behind, trembling inside despite her outward calm. She felt no triumph in this, only a profound sadness at how far they'd fallen. Returning to her hotel that night, she knew the next phase would be even harder, deciding on the fate of her marriage, the final division of assets, and whether Tekelis itself could be salvaged under her partial guidance. One thing was certain, she reminded herself. She refused to remain silent or complicit ever again. With Julian ousted from Tekelis, the company hurried to project a sense of renewal. Press releases emphasized the board's commitment to robust ethical practices and transparent governance. The stock price stabilized slightly, though it remained well below pre-scandal levels. Major investors like the Westbridge Group and Hudson Equity issued cautious statements of support as long as the transitional leadership took Tekelis back on track. Julian found himself in a surreal limbo. He retreated to a smaller estate in the Hamptons, a property he'd acquired some years ago for weekend getaways with Eleanor. Now, ironically, he was alone, aside from a handful of staff who had loyally followed him. For the first time since Tekelis's meteoric rise, he had no corporate obligations, no daily calls from a bustling workforce. His phone rang less, and when it did, it was typically reporters hounding him or lawyers fretting about potential litigation. Ava LeBlanc tried to comfort him at first. "We'll figure this out," she murmured over a dinner of catered sushi in the estate's lavish dining room. But tension simmered between them. She was bitter that their affair had become public knowledge, damaging her reputation in the investment community. And Julian's mood swung from rage to self-pity, making him an unpredictable partner at best. Within days, they quarreled frequently, culminating in Ava storming out, suitcases in hand, muttering curses in French. She left behind only a note. This is no longer beneficial for me. Adieu. Julian stared at her note, feeling a hollow pit where his pride once reigned. The lavish estate around him, the marble floors, designer furniture, priceless artwork, felt meaningless without the adoration of the business world or the quiet support of the wife he had betrayed. He roamed empty hallways, recalling half-forgotten memories with Eleanor, a snowy New Year's Eve at this very estate, where they toasted with hot chocolate, not champagne, by the fireplace, dreaming of the future. That future was now in tatters. Meanwhile, Gerald Hammond and the Tech Ellie's legal team negotiated relentlessly with Julian's lawyers over the distribution of assets. Because Tech Ellis's shares largely belonged to Eleanor through her Rafferty Legacy Holdings entity, she technically controlled the direction of the company. The prenuptial conditions and the potential for a messy divorce led many to wonder if the brand would survive. Rumors even suggested that a major competitor was poised to make an acquisition offer if Tech Ellis couldn't regain stability. Eleanor, for her part, felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. She never wanted to become a corporate magnate. Her passion lay in philanthropic work and quiet evenings with a good book. Yet she also recognized a responsibility to Tech Ellis's employees, thousands of people whose livelihoods depended on the company's success. She spent her days in meetings with the interim CEO, ensuring minimal disruptions to day-to-day operations and forging a new code of ethics that would prevent future misappropriations. At night, she laid awake, replaying her life with Julian like a distant dream. Despite everything, a trace of regret lingered. They had once shared genuine love. She sometimes found tears on her pillow, remembering his wedding vows, his earnestness in the early years. But the pain he inflicted, the arrogance and deceit, those overshadowed any nostalgia. If she entertained any thought of reconciliation, the relentless news cycle about their scandal slammed the door shut. She realized she was better off charting her own path. Then came the day her attorney informed her that Julian, in a moment of desperation, had asked for a private meeting. "He wants to talk about a settlement, both corporate and personal," Gerald said. "It might be wise to hear him out, if only to expedite the divorce process." Eleanor agreed, albeit warily. They decided on a neutral venue, the quiet chambers of a top-notch mediation center in Manhattan. When the day arrived, she entered the building with her head high, wearing a navy dress that embodied elegance. In a private room with plush chairs and a large window overlooking the Hudson River, she found Julian waiting, flanked by his lawyer. He looked gaunt, older than she remembered, as though the scandal had physically aged him in mere weeks. They exchanged polite greetings, the tension thick. Julian's lawyer initiated the discussion, proposing that Julian retain some personal assets and a small portion of Tech Ellis shares, while relinquishing majority control to Eleanor or her entity. In return, Julian would sign a swift, uncontested divorce, protecting the brand from further public drama. Eleanor listened in silence. Her own legal counsel assured her that the terms favored her heavily. She could have insisted on even harsher terms, but deep down, she didn't crave vengeance. She just wanted closure. When Julian finally spoke, his voice cracked, betraying vulnerability. I'm sorry," he managed, using the old nickname that once meant affection. "I never thought it would end like this." Her eyes flickered with sadness, but also resolve. "Neither did I, but your choices forced my hand." His shoulders slumped. "Do you think maybe we can—" He trailed off, the question unfinished. She shook her head, tears threatening to spill. "No, Julian. Too much damage has been done. Let's finalize this and move on. And so, after hours of negotiations, they struck a settlement that effectively left Eleanor with the controlling stake of Techelis, plus a significant share of personal assets. Julian retained enough capital to live comfortably, but nothing compared to the billionaire status he once flaunted. The final documents would be drafted, requiring only their signatures. As they parted ways in the hallway, Julian reached out as though to touch her arm, but she stepped back gently. "Goodbye, Julian," she whispered, walking away without looking back. The echoes of her footsteps lingered in his mind, a haunting reminder of the empire he lost and the love he shattered through hubris. The weeks following the settlement felt simultaneously surreal and relieving for Eleanor. One morning, she woke in her hotel suite, the skyline sparkling under a golden sunrise, and realized she was free from the tumult of her failed marriage. A wave of complicated emotions washed over her: sadness for what was lost, relief for what was salvaged, and a cautious excitement about the future. She decided it was time to leave the suite and find a more permanent place to call her own. She enlisted the help of a renowned real estate agent, Frederick Jacobs, who showed her an elegant apartment overlooking the East River. It was modern, yet not overly ostentatious, perfect for someone who desired comfort without the pretension. Upon stepping onto the balcony, feeling the crisp breeze on her skin, she thought, "This is my space now, mine alone." She signed the lease, grateful that she could afford it without question. Meanwhile, at Techelis, the interim CEO and board continued the restructuring. They implemented the new code of ethics that Eleanor championed, tightened financial oversight, and introduced leadership guidelines requiring transparency. The stock slowly inched upward as investors saw real effort to restore stability. While some in the media predicted Techelis would never regain its former glory, others lauded the Eleanor effect, crediting her moral stance for saving a foundering company. Eleanor, though, had no intention of staying entrenched in the CEO role. She approached the board with a plan to appoint a permanent chief executive, someone well-respected in the tech community with a track record for ethical leadership. She insisted on staying engaged as a major shareholder, offering strategic direction, but not as a daily operator. "My passion lies in philanthropic work," she explained to the board. "Once Techelis is secure, I'd like to focus on that." The board agreed, appreciating her clarity and the sense of unity she inspired. Within a month, Techelis appointed Linda Zhao, a respected tech innovator known for spearheading sustainable computing initiatives, as the new CEO. Under Linda's leadership, Techelis launched a new philanthropic branch dedicated to bridging digital divides in underserved regions, an initiative Eleanor had long wanted. Finally, she felt the company was fulfilling a higher purpose, reminiscent of the early vision Julian once espoused before greed overshadowed him. In her personal life, Eleanor found solace in reconnecting with old friends and forging new alliances. Michelle Donovan introduced her to philanthropic circles in the city, including Simone Kaufman, a venture capitalist who championed female entrepreneurs. Together, they discussed setting up a foundation to fund women-led startups, an idea that sparked a fresh sense of purpose in Eleanor's heart. The final step was signing the divorce papers. By now, everything was prepared. The assets parted, the Techelis shares secured in her name, and the financial settlement ensuring she never had to worry about money. Eleanor scheduled the signing at Gerald Hammond's office. Julian arrived, looking subdued, in a simple navy suit. No cameras, no reporters, just a quiet legal procedure to end a marriage that had once been front-page news. As they sat across the polished oak table, each with their attorney, the air was charged with unspoken regrets. The lawyers exchanged final pleasantries, then laid out the documents. Eleanor signed first, her hand steady. Julian hesitated for a moment, pen hovering above the line. Finally, he scribbled his name, a resigned exhalation escaping his lips, and just like that, their union was dissolved. They walked out of the conference room in silence. Julian tried to meet her gaze, but she offered only a polite nod. There were no more words to say. He left, carrying a folded copy of the decree in his briefcase, stepping into an elevator that whisked him away. Eleanor lingered for a moment, gazing at the city through a window in the hallway. The bustle of pedestrians and cars below reminded her of the world she lived in, a city of constant change, heartbreak, and second chances. She took a deep breath, feeling a strange blend of finality and possibility. With her signature, she had closed a painful chapter and set the stage for a new one. That evening, she moved her last suitcase into the new apartment. She made a cup of chamomile tea, settling into a comfortable armchair near a large window. Gazing at the lights reflecting off the East River, she allowed herself a small smile. She had lost a marriage, but gained her self-respect, and with it, a path to an authentic life. Tomorrow is another day, and it's mine to live on my terms. In the months that followed, Eleanor's transformation became a quiet inspiration for many. She poured herself into philanthropic initiatives, launching the Rafferty Foundation, named in honor of her parents, to promote literacy and tech education in underprivileged communities. She leveraged her connections, not for personal gain, but to forge partnerships between techelas, smaller nonprofits, and philanthropic icons like Oprah Winfrey's Angel Network. Bill Gates even reached out with a letter praising her dedication to bridging digital divides in developing nations. Without the burden of daily corporate politics, Eleanor felt liberated. She traveled to rural areas where techelas-funded programs provided internet and digital learning resources. In a small village in Kenya, she read storybooks to children in a newly equipped library. She visited a refugee camp in Jordan, overseeing the installation of solar-powered learning centers. Each project affirmed her belief in purposeful work over the superficial glamour she once thought was part of her marriage. Meanwhile, techelas under Linda Zhao's leadership stabilized. The audit concluded with official findings that placed blame for financial misappropriations squarely on Julian and a handful of complicit executives. Prosecutors considered charges, though many believed Julian would likely settle with hefty fines rather than face jail time. Linda steered the company toward green technologies, fostering a renewed sense of innovation and responsibility. The public started to see techelas not as a scandal-ridden empire, but as a reformed corporate citizen. And Julian? He slipped from the headlines. He retained some wealth, enough to maintain a comfortable life, but his star power in the tech world was gone. Rumor had it he spent his days seeking new ventures, but potential partners viewed him with caution. He attempted to reach out to Eleanor several times, letters, voicemails, even sending flowers on her birthday. She accepted none of them. She had moved beyond needing his apologies or half-hearted gestures. Now living independently, Eleanor found an unexpected sense of joy in hosting intimate gatherings at her new apartment. She had a small circle of friends, Michelle, Simone Kaufman, and a few philanthropic colleagues who met regularly for relaxed dinners. They laughed over shared memories, planned fundraising events, and occasionally teased Eleanor about the men who subtly tried to approach her at galas. While she wasn't seeking a new romance, she felt a stirring recognition that the world was open again. She could love again someday, perhaps, when she was ready. One brisk afternoon, she received a visit from her father, Richard Rafferty. He walked into her apartment, eyes brimming with pride as he noticed how she'd arranged her living space. Shelves lined with books, fresh flowers, a painting of a sunset over Cape Cod, a nod to her Massachusetts roots. Sipping coffee at her kitchen table, he smiled. "You've come a long way, Ellie." She nodded, warmth filling her chest. "I was so scared when everything collapsed, Dad, but maybe it had to happen. I lost illusions, but found myself." He reached across the table, squeezing her hand gently. "Your mother and I raised you to stand up for what's right, and you did so with dignity. That's something no one can take from you." They spent the afternoon reminiscing about her childhood, her mother's teaching methods at the library, and the day she first met Julian at that charity event. How wide-eyed she'd been. Despite the heartbreak, they chose to remember the hope she carried then, a hope that now manifested differently, not pinned to a man's ambition, but directed at a broader vision of service and empowerment. As the sun set over the East River, casting a golden glow through the windows, Eleanor walked her father to the door. She realized she had an upcoming flight to finalize, a trip to a remote region in South America, where the Rafferty Foundation was establishing a digital literacy center. She was eager to see the children's faces as they opened ebooks for the first time. In that moment, she recognized that her story, once consumed by a cheating billionaire husband and a silent wife's pain, had evolved into something else entirely. She was no longer that silent wife. She was a determined philanthropist, a savvy shareholder, and a woman who discovered her voice. And as she closed the door behind her father, she felt the gentle thrill of a new day dawning, a day shaped by her choices and guided by the unbreakable resilience she'd always carried within. A year passed quietly, marked by Eleanor's continued involvement in philanthropic projects and Tekelis's steady climb back into favor with both the public and the markets. She remained a major shareholder, her voice influential in major corporate decisions, yet she spent most of her time traveling to foundation sites and forging new partnerships. One balmy evening, Eleanor attended a high-profile charity gala in New York City, one reminiscent of the fateful night she first met Julian. This time, however, she walked through the grand doors, not as a spouse on a billionaire's arm, but as a guest of honor recognized for her philanthropic achievements. She felt the subtle shift in how people greeted her, with genuine respect rather than polite condescension. Between mingling with donors and greeting old acquaintances, she took a moment to sip champagne by a quiet fountain in the courtyard. The soft trickle of water soothed her. That's when a voice spoke behind her. "It's been a while, Eleanor." She turned to see Julian standing at a discreet distance, looking thinner and more subdued. His once arrogant posture had mellowed. He wore a simple black tuxedo, his tie slightly askew. For a moment, an awkward silence stretched between them. "Julian," she said at last, acknowledging him with a curt nod. She half expected her heart to hammer with old anger or hurt, but instead she felt only a gentle wave of nostalgia. He stepped closer, not too close, as if respecting her boundaries. "I heard you'd be here. I just wanted to say congratulations on everything. The Rafferty Foundation is doing amazing work. I see the updates on social media sometimes." She nodded, swirling her champagne. "Thank you. It's taken a lot of effort, but it's worth it." He cleared his throat. "Look, I won't keep you. I just—" He paused, struggling for the right words. "I'm sorry for everything. It's no excuse, but I was so blinded by ambition, and I lost sight of what mattered." Eleanor studied him. She noticed lines of regret etched into his face, a vulnerability in his eyes. Once, she had longed to hear these words, but time had transformed her perspective. She felt no surge of bitterness, only a quiet acceptance that this was part of their story's final coda. "I appreciate the apology," she said softly. "I hope you find your way, Julian. Truly." He gave a weak smile. "Maybe I'm trying. I've started a smaller venture, something less about greed and more about sustainable tech." He hesitated. "I know I have a long way to go to prove I've changed, but I wanted you to know that you made me realize what I threw away." She offered a gracious nod. "I'm glad you're moving forward. We all deserve a chance to learn from our mistakes." They lapsed into another silence, broken only by the distant hum of the gala's music. Then, with a polite bow of his head, Julian retreated, leaving Eleanor alone by the fountain once more. She watched him melt back into the crowd, his figure blending into a sea of tuxedos and evening gowns. She felt a mix of relief and empathy for the man who had once been the center of her universe. After a moment, a friend approached, inviting her back into the gala. She rejoined the festivities, sipping her champagne, greeting well-wishers, and discussing new projects. Amid the swirl of people, she felt a calm sense of closure. Julian's apology had been overdue, but in truth, she didn't need it to validate her journey. She had found her voice, claimed her power, and embarked on a life steeped in purpose. By midnight, the gala wound down. Stepping into her waiting car, Eleanor gazed up at the star-strewn sky, the city lights twinkling below. Tomorrow, she'd fly to another foundation site, continuing her mission of empowering young minds through technology. The memory of Julian's downfall and her quiet triumph over heartbreak were part of her story. Yes, but they no longer defined her. She had discovered something far more profound: self-reliance, compassion, and the strength to reshape her destiny on her own terms. And so, with a serene smile, she closed her eyes, ready for whatever new chapter lay ahead. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey in Cheating Billionaire Husband. Silent wife takes all shares, leaving him empty-handed. This story reminds us that even the most dazzling fortunes and grandest public images can crumble when met with betrayal and moral failings. Yet it also highlights a quieter strength: the unassuming wife who finds her voice, claims her power, and reshapes her life with dignity. If this tale of heartbreak, resilience, and personal triumph resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. By doing so, you help us bring more captivating stories of love, loss, and redemption to life. We appreciate your support and look forward to sharing more narratives that speak to the enduring power of the human spirit. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next story.